Okay, let's jump right into this. Picture it. It's 11:40 p.m. Down in first class, the band is literally still playing, and the champagne glasses are full. But outside, 200 feet above the freezing water, a lookout named Frederick Fleet is squinting into pitch blackness. No moon, no wind. These are absolutely the worst possible conditions to spot ice. Why? Because there are zero waves breaking against the base of the icebergs to give them away. It's just a dark, flat void. And then he sees it, a shape, somehow blacker than the black around it. He hits the bell 3 times. That's ship code for dead ahead, grabs the phone, and just yells, "Iceberg, right ahead!" 37, that is the exact number of seconds the bridge had to react. I mean, just think about that for a second. 37 seconds to halt a massive 46,000-ton ship. A ship that literally required over half a mile of open ocean just to come to a complete stop. Talk about a terrifying lack of reaction time, right? But here's the thing that really gets me about all this. This ship had already been warned. Not once, not twice, 6 times. So it brings us to a huge question. Was this whole thing an unavoidable act of God or a mathematical certainty? Look, we all know how the story of the RMS Titanic ends, but you probably don't know exactly why it ended that way. Most folks just write it off as a tragic, unpredictable accident, wrong place, wrong time. But the sinking of the Titanic isn't really a story about an iceberg. Nope, it's a story about a series of small, quiet human decisions, calculation errors, and engineering shortcuts made months and hours before the collision. In this explainer, we're going to prove that the Titanic sank because of a fatal chain of errors that turned a survivable scrape into a guaranteed death sentence. Let's break it down piece by piece, rivet by rivet.
Chapter 1: The 6 Ignored Ice Bulletins.
To really understand this disaster, we've got to go into the radio room and uncover this crazy series of ignored warnings that rolled in way before that iceberg was ever spotted. The chronological escalation here is just staggering. At 9 a.m., the steamer Carbonia radios a warning, ice ahead. It's logged and then ignored. Then, at 1:42 p.m., the Baltic reports icebergs directly in Titanic's path. Now, the captain actually reads this one, but get this, he literally puts it in his pocket. He doesn't post it for his officers, he just pockets it. Fast forward to 7:30 p.m., the Californian reports 3 large icebergs. But pay close attention to this 9:40 p.m. mark. The Mesaba sends the single most accurate ice report of the entire night. They're describing a solid wall of ice dead ahead. But the wireless operator, Jack Phillips, he's buried under this massive backlog of passenger telegrams. He never delivers the warning to the bridge. And look, it wasn't out of malice, it was just sheer overwhelming workload. Finally, at 11 p.m., the Californian tries one last time, and Titanic's operator essentially snaps at them to shut up and stop interrupting his commercial transmissions. 6 warnings, 0 action, 22 knots. It's just a massive tragic irony. Despite 6 distinct documented warnings, 0 course changes were made. 0 speed reductions were ordered. The flagship of the White Star Line just kept plowing ahead at 22 knots, which is near its absolute top speed, right through a known ice field in the pitch black with no moon. Chapter 2: The Fatal Rivet Flaw. So, let's transition from the bridge down to the hull's materials, because we really need to debunk a massive popular myth here. When most people picture the collision, they picture this huge, jagged gash torn into the side of the ship, like a can opener slicing a tin can. But metallurgists who actually studied the recovered hull fragments found something entirely different. The rivets failed. So, a ship's hull is built from overlapping steel plates held together by thousands of rivets. At the bow and stern, the hull curves way too tightly for those big steam-powered riveting machines, so the workers had to hammer these specific rivets in by hand. And hand hammering requires softer raw iron. But back then, iron ore quality wasn't standardized at all. This introduces something called slag inclusions. Basically, these are pockets of glassy waste material trapped right inside the iron.
Let's compare the materials directly. You've got number 3 grade iron, which has a high slag content and becomes severely brittle in the cold. On the other hand, you have number 4 grade iron, which is premium, structurally sound, and has almost 0 slag. Well, shipyard records later revealed that because the supply chain was stretched incredibly thin building Titanic and her sister ships, the builders used the lower grade number 3 iron rivets in sections of the bow and stern instead of that premium number 4 grade. Now, under normal stress in normal waters, you'd never even notice. But iron with slag inclusions turns dangerously brittle in freezing temperatures, and the North Atlantic that night was hovering right around freezing. So when the iceberg brushed the hull, And remember, it was just a glancing blow, a brushing scrape, not a head-on punch. The impact force transferred through the steel plates directly into those cold, compromised rivets. Instead of bending under the pressure, they just snapped. The heads popped clean off. The seams of the ship literally peeled open along a 300-foot stretch of the hull, exactly like a zipper. This wasn't some unavoidable blueprint shape flaw. It was a materials calculation error baked right in during construction.
Chapter 3. Designed to Flood. Now, moving our investigation to the blueprint phase, we find a critical flaw in the ship's 16 supposedly watertight compartments. The Titanic was designed so that if one or two compartments flooded, the ship would stay afloat. Sounds brilliant on paper, right? But here's how it actually played out. Step 1, the iceberg breaches 6 compartments, because of those popping rivets we just talked about. Step 2, water rapidly fills those breached sections. And here is the fatal blueprint error in Step 3. The steel bulkhead walls separating these compartments did not go high enough. They stopped several decks below the top of the ship, just so they can make room for these fancy wide-open passenger spaces. Honestly, if you were to draw this out like a simple MS Paint doodle with stick figures, it would look ridiculous. A wall that doesn't even reach the ceiling? So when the water rose, it didn't stay contained. It just spilled over the top of the low bulkheads right into the next compartment, perfectly mimicking an overflowing ice cube tray.
Once 6 compartments flooded, it became a mathematical certainty of sinking. The ship's design only accounted for 2 or 3 compartments flooding. Once 6 were laid wide open to the ocean, physics completely took over. At that point, it was totally beyond the help of any crew, any captain's frantic orders, or any massive pumps. The ship was mathematically doomed the exact second that water began spilling over the tops of those bulkheads. And to compound all of this madness, the lifeboats on board legally met the terribly outdated regulations of the time, but they carried far fewer than half the people aboard.
Chapter 4. The Deadly Chain Reaction. All right, it's time to synthesize all these separate, quiet failures into one fatal sequence of compounding errors. First error, ignored ice warnings. The result? The ship maintained top speed in darkness, giving the crew only 37 seconds to react. Second error, substandard rivets. The result? Instead of leaving a survivable dent, the seams peeled wide open upon a glancing impact. Third error, low bulkheads. The result? Water uncontrollably spilled between the compartments. The absolutely crucial takeaway here is that every single individual error, the speed, the rivets, the bulkheads, was totally survivable on its own. But linked together in this chain, they were absolutely fatal. Chapter 5. Regulations Written in Blood. The ship sank in 2 hours and 40 minutes. Over 1,500 people lost their lives, mostly from the agonizing weight in the freezing water. The immediate public outrage led to sweeping U.S. and British investigations, and the permanent changes forged directly from these calculation errors ended up rewriting maritime law forever. First, the International Ice Patrol was established to track iceberg positions, and hey, they still operate today. Second, the creation of SOLAS, mandating lifeboats for every single passenger on board, no exceptions. Third, bulkhead height standards were raised to permanently close that exact overflowing ice cube tray loophole. And fourth, wireless radio rooms were required to operate 24/7, ensuring a distress call would literally never be missed just because an operator went to sleep. It brings us to an incredibly powerful truth. Regulations aren't written in ink, they're written in blood. Every safety rule you don't even think twice about today, every lifeboat count, every bulkhead height requirement, exists only because people paid the ultimate price finding the invisible engineering gaps first. The real lesson of the Titanic isn't about ice. It's about how invisible tolerances in materials and design margins silently compound, hiding in the background until they are all tested at the exact same time. So, I want to leave you with this provocative question. What other invisible calculation errors are we totally ignoring today? If you want to understand how the next disaster almost never has to happen because someone already paid the price to teach us, make sure you subscribe to our channel. Because next time, we're going to bring you another explainer on a catastrophe that engineers clearly saw coming, but nobody listened to in time. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll catch you on the next one.